Jungkook walked past Jimin without speaking. That silence broke the entire room. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Taehyung whispered, eyes fixed on the hallway like it was a crime scene. The fluorescent lights above buzzed, flickering ever so slightly. A moment ago, Jungkook had walked into the practice room, chest heaving, jaw clenched, his presence thunderous in its silence. Every step echoed like a verdict. Then he walked past Jimin. Did not look. Did not nod. Did not even breathe in his direction. And in that 1 second, less than a heartbeat, the air changed. It was as if the temperature dropped, as if the mirrored walls trembled under the weight of something ancient and unspoken. Jimin's knuckles tightened around the water bottle in his hand until the plastic crackled. His eyes, wide and hollow, never left Jungkook's back. The silence wasn't absence, it was presence, heavy, charged. Something had broken, not something, everything. No one said a word. Yoongi, leaning against the far wall with a towel over his head, slowly removed one earpiece. Namjoon shifted his weight uneasily, opening his mouth to speak, then closing it again. Even the music that had been blaring moments ago seemed to have the sense to stop. Only Jungkook moved, toward the far end of the room, where he dropped his gym bag like it was just another day, rolled his shoulders, and pulled his hoodie over his head. He still hadn't looked at Jimin. Jimin, on the other hand, didn't move. His body was stiff, but his eyes flickered with something raw. Anger, hurt, fear, it was hard to tell. The perfect facade he wore in front of cameras cracked slightly, just enough for those paying attention to see the boy underneath. The boy who had once laughed too loudly, danced too hard, loved too deeply. Taehyung swallowed. "What happened?" he whispered again, but no one answered. Because they all knew. Or thought they knew. A month ago, things had been different. Jungkook and Jimin were inseparable, practicing together until dawn, whispering in backstage corners, exchanging those rare smiles that spoke in languages only they understood. Until Busan. No one knew what had happened during that 3-day retreat. They left together, laughing, and came back distant, fractured. Jungkook stopped texting. Jimin stopped asking. Their choreography lost its edge. Harmonies sounded mechanical. Something spiritual had been gutted. Now, in the silence of this practice room, that fracture had become undeniable. "Let's warm up," Jungkook said suddenly, his voice low and razor-sharp. He didn't wait, just started stretching, methodical, controlled. Jimin blinked. Then slowly, he moved too. But every motion between them now seemed ghosted, like two planets orbiting the same sun, but destined never to touch again. The practice began, movements precise, expressions neutral, but it was like watching two shadows that had once belonged to something human. During a break, Namjoon finally spoke. "We need to talk," he said, tone careful, directed at no one and everyone. "No," Jungkook said without turning. "You're not okay," Namjoon pressed. "This group is not okay." "I'm fine." But Jimin finally looked up and met Jungkook's eyes. "Are you?" Jungkook's jaw flexed. For one split second, something slipped, a flicker of guilt, of pain, and then it was gone. "I said I'm fine," he said, then walked out, leaving the door to slam shut behind him. This time, Jimin didn't just stand still. He sat down, quietly, almost gently, like the energy had finally left his bones. "I can't keep pretending," he whispered. Yoongi crossed the room and sat beside him. "You don't have to," he said. Outside the practice room, the hallway stretched in sterile silence. Jungkook leaned against the wall, fists clenched at his sides, chest rising and falling like he'd just outrun a nightmare. He didn't cry, didn't scream, but he wanted to. Because that silence, the one in the room, was nothing compared to the silence inside his own head. The things he'd seen, the choices he'd made. The secret he couldn't tell. And the boy he couldn't stop loving. Even if it broke them both. "You think I'm the villain now?" Jimin's voice echoed off the studio walls, raw, guttural. "Then say it, Jungkook." The door had slammed shut only seconds ago, but Jungkook was already turning back, his eyes wild, chest rising and falling like he was drowning in something thicker than air. They stood face to face now, in the middle of the corridor, where cameras didn't reach and words cut deeper than silence ever could. "Don't do this here," Jungkook muttered, glancing around, but his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. "Not in front of them." "Why not?" Jimin stepped closer. Too close. The kind of close they used to reserve for stolen moments backstage, for whispered confessions, for touches that meant more than any song ever could. "You didn't seem to care about them when you walked past me like I was nothing." "You are nothing," Jungkook snapped. Silence. Regret. But the words were already hanging in the air, poisoned and irreversible. Jimin didn't flinch, didn't cry, just stared. "Then why?" he said slowly, his voice trembling. "Do you look at me like that when you think no one sees?" Jungkook opened his mouth, then closed it again. "You're such a goddamn liar," Jimin whispered, and this time his voice broke, just a little. Inside the practice room, the rest of the group was frozen in a performance that wasn't choreographed. Taehyung sat rigid, eyes fixed on the floor. Yoongi had taken his usual place at the window, arms folded but jaw clenched. Namjoon kept packing, fingers twitching like they wanted to rewrite the scene but couldn't find the words. "They need to talk," Jin said finally, softly, "even if it burns everything." "It already is," Taehyung murmured. Outside, the confrontation was unraveling. "You don't know what I saw that night," Jungkook said, quieter now, barely audible but sharp enough to wound. "You think this is about us, about feelings." Jimin stepped back, finally. "If it's not about us, then why do you look like you're about to fall apart every time I'm near?" "Because you don't get it," Jungkook hissed, suddenly louder, desperate. "You left me alone in that room, Jimin. You said you'd be right back and then you disappeared, for hours, and when I found you." He stopped, he looked away. "You don't want me to say it, do you?" Jungkook asked bitterly. "Because then we'll all have to live with the truth." Jimin blinked. "I was trying to protect you." "You lied to me." "I had to." "You touched him." Jimin's breath caught. The hallway felt too small, too bright, too loud. It was the first time anyone had said it aloud. The name didn't need to be spoken. They both knew. That night in Busan, that rooftop, that fire in Jimin's eyes when he thought no one was watching, the flash of another silhouette. The way Jungkook had stood in the rain, waiting, only to find. "No," Jimin said, "it wasn't like that." "Then what was it?" Jungkook demanded. Jimin's eyes welled. "It was a mistake. I panicked. He said you didn't care, that you'd already left, that it was over. I didn't know what to believe." "And you believed him," Jungkook's voice broke fully now. "Not me." "I believed what I saw," Jimin whispered. "You were gone. I waited too, you know. I stood in that room for hours before I left." "Then why didn't you come back?" "Because I saw you with her." Jungkook staggered a step back like he'd been struck. "No," he said, "you didn't." "You were holding her hand," Jimin said. "You smiled." Jungkook looked stricken, hollowed. "She was my cousin." "Oh." They stared at each other, two ghosts clinging to old versions of themselves. "I came to find you that night," Jungkook said. "I searched every bar, every back alley, every rooftop, and when I found you..." Jimin covered his mouth with a shaking hand. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Jungkook replied, voice ragged. The silence now was a different kind of heavy, grief, not anger, regret, not blame. Then came footsteps. Namjoon appeared, arms tense, eyes flicking between them. "I don't care what this is about. Whatever happened in Busan, whatever broke you too, you need to figure out if you're going to destroy this group in the process." "We're not," Jimin started. "You are," Namjoon cut in. "And you know it. You think we haven't noticed the rehearsals, the interviews. We're all pretending nothing's wrong while you two are bleeding under the surface." "No one asked you to get involved," Jungkook muttered. "I'm the leader," Namjoon snapped. "It's my job." "Then lead," Jimin said coldly. "Don't pick sides." Namjoon stared at him, then at Jungkook. "I'm not," he said finally. But if you two don't fix this, someone else will, and not in a way any of us want. Behind him, Jin was standing now. You have 3 hours until the press conference. Figure it out. They left. The door closed. And for the first time since Busan, Jungkook and Jimin were truly alone. Jungkook sat down slowly, back against the wall, dragging a hand through his hair. I was going to tell you, he said. I was going to tell you too, Jimin whispered, sitting beside him. But I thought, if you knew what I did, you'd never look at me the same way again. I never stopped, Jungkook said. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't break a room, but held it together. For now. You kissed him, didn't you? The words slipped from Jungkook's mouth like venom, low and steady, not shouted but whispered with the precision of a blade pressed to skin. The two of them were still seated on the cold floor of the corridor, knees almost touching, breaths fogging up the space between them, but the warmth from their shared history had long disappeared. Jimin flinched. I said it was a mistake. That's not an answer. Jimin didn't speak. He stared at the floor, jaw clenched, fingers trembling slightly as if they remembered the weight of something they weren't supposed to hold. Jungkook waited, not because he wanted to hear it, but because he couldn't move forward without knowing. The truth, the whole of it. Yes, Jimin finally admitted. I kissed him. Jungkook laughed, short, bitter. Was he better? Don't, Jimin warned. Was he softer with you? Did he call you by your name like I did, or? I said don't, Jimin snapped, turning to him. I'm not going to stand here and let you turn my guilt into your sport. Jungkook's face twisted. You think I'm playing? No, I think you're trying not to bleed, so you're cutting me instead. The silence that followed was sharper than any scream. A pair of staff walked past, pretending not to see them. The hallway was growing colder, or maybe it was just them, stripped raw under the weight of unsaid things. Regrets turned into grenades, every glance a landmine. He said you loved him once, Jimin said, voice quiet. Jungkook blinked. Who? You know who. You believed him again. I believed the way your voice sounded when you said his name. Minhyun was a lie, Jungkook spat. Everything he told you, everything he showed you, it was orchestrated. He wanted to break us. Jimin tilted his head, eyes narrow. So it's true, he meant something to you. Jungkook didn't respond. That was the only confirmation Jimin needed. I wasn't the only one keeping secrets, Jimin said. And the truth is, I would have forgiven you, even if it was him, even if it was more than a kiss. You think this is about forgiveness? Jungkook stood now, packing. This is about trust. You left me without a word. Do you know what that does to someone? When the person you've built your entire goddamn universe around vanishes and reappears with someone else's taste on their lips. Jimin stood too, fire rising in his voice. And do you know what it does to someone to feel second choice? To hear you say one thing but watch you drift further and further away every day. You were never second. You made me feel like it. They were too loud now. The walls could hear. Maybe the cameras were already rolling from a corner they hadn't noticed. It didn't matter. The wounds were open, and neither had the strength to close them yet. Down the hall, Taehyung had pressed his ear to the wall. They're going to destroy each other, he murmured to Yoongi, who sat cross-legged beside him, eyes cold, unreadable. Or they'll finally say what they've been too scared to say, Yoongi replied. Sometimes the only way out is through fire. Back in the corridor, the fire burned. I was scared, Jimin said, more softly now, of what it meant to need you the way I did, of what it meant to love you and wonder if you loved me the same. I did, Jungkook said. Jimin turned to him. I still do. Those 3 words sucked the oxygen from the space between them. Jimin's face crumbled, just for a second, before he caught himself. You have a hell of a way of showing it. I didn't know how to fight for you when I thought you'd already left. I didn't know how to stay when I didn't even recognize who we were anymore. Their phones buzzed synchronously, the group chat. Jin's message, 10 minutes to the press conference. Move. They didn't move. Jungkook stared at his screen, then at Jimin. We go out there and pretend. Jimin laughed bitterly. Isn't that what we've always done? Jungkook's eyes narrowed. You know what's worse than betrayal? Jimin waited. Regret, Jungkook said, because it eats you alive and you can't blame anyone but yourself. The tension shifted, slower, sadder. Do you regret me? Jimin asked. Jungkook looked at him for a long time. No, he said, but I regret who we became. The hallway was quiet now. Only the distant hum of fluorescent lights remained. Jimin nodded once, lips pressed tight. Come on, he said. Let's lie to the world together, one last time. They walked down the hall in tandem, not touching, not talking. Just two shadows stretched long by the weight of memory and the press lights waiting to blind them. Inside the conference room, cameras clicked like gunfire. Questions fired off. How's the group dynamic? Any personal challenges during the new album? Fans have noticed some tension. Jungkook smiled like he was carved from marble. Jimin laughed like he hadn't cried in weeks. Namjoon did the talking, shielding them as always. But the eyes of the world were watching, and behind those smiles, under the perfect lighting and sculpted words, something more dangerous than scandal was forming. Truth. And it was tired of hiding. Run faster, damn it, this way, Jimin shouted, grabbing Jungkook's wrist as the blare of sirens rose behind them, painting their shadows in red and blue. Their lungs burned, their shoes slapped against rain-slick concrete, and adrenaline surged like wildfire. The alley was a blur of dumpsters, shattered neon signs, and rust-coated fire escapes. They sprinted through the maze of Daegu's forgotten underbelly, chased not just by HYBE's private militia, but by the roaring truth that was finally loose and unforgiving. Jungkook stumbled. Taehyung, wait. No, you stop, you die. Keep moving. They burst into the back of a shuttered karaoke bar. Jimin kicked the door shut, then bolted it. The air inside was stale with mold and old perfume, and the broken disco lights still hung like ghosts of laughter long extinguished. Jungkook slid to the floor, clutching his ribs. I think one's cracked. Jimin dropped beside him, pulled his jacket off, and tore the sleeve. Let me see. Taehyung, Jungkook said, grabbing his wrist. You don't have to do this. You can still walk away. Shut up, Jimin snapped. If I was going to walk away, I would have done it a year ago. Jungkook looked at him then, eyes wide with something raw. Why didn't you? Jimin didn't answer right away. He bound the cloth tight, tying it with shaking fingers. Because I loved you too much to believe you were really gone. Jungkook swallowed hard. I wasn't sure anyone would. You were wrong. The silence between them was thick, poolsing with things left unsaid. Then Jimin stood, walked to the cracked mirror, and stared at his reflection. Blood on his cheek. Eyes that didn't belong to an idol anymore. He crossed the line. Do you have it? He asked, still staring at himself. Jungkook pulled the flash drive from his boot. Every dirty file, every operation log, including a project called Seraphim Protocol. I don't even know what that one means yet, but they buried it deeper than anything else. Jimin nodded. We leak it. To who? The press. They're owned, socials, controlled, fans, they'll never believe it. Not all of them, Jimin said, turning. Some of them always knew something was off. They felt the silence, the patterns, they asked questions. They got blocked, shadow banned, gaslit, but they're still out there. You want to ignite army? Jungkook asked. You want them to rise. I want the truth to be louder than their lies. Jungkook smirked, despite the pain. Then we go to the one place they can't scrub. Jimin raised an eyebrow. Where? Live, broadcast, not digital, not streamed. Radio frequency. Pirate signal, I know someone. Jimin exhaled. Then let's move. They slipped out the back, disappearing into the underworld of Daegu, into tunnels beneath the city that only the broken and the lost remembered. They made their way to an abandoned broadcast station, buried beneath a temple, now run by a rogue DJ named Hajun, a former industry engineer who had vanished after refusing to play along with the system. The station was a bunker of wires and static. Old equipment hummed with forgotten power, and the walls were lined with shelves of tapes labeled with names of idols who had retired too young. Hajun stared at them through cracked glasses. "Well, shit," he said. "They told me you were dead." "Not yet," Jungkook said, handing him the drive. Hajun plugged it in, his face twisted as he scrolled. "Jesus Christ, this is a kill order. You know what happens if I air this?" "They'll find you," Jimin said, "like they found us." Hajun gave a dry chuckle. "Then let's make it worth it." An hour later, the signal was primed. Jimin sat in the booth, headphones on, staring at the blinking red light. Jungkook stood beside him, silent, trembling but ready. Hajun gave the nod. The light went solid. Jimin leaned forward and spoke. "This is Park Jimin." His voice cracked through the frequency, carried across rooftops, into car radios, into old transistor sets in bedrooms filled with BTS posters and tear-stained photo cards. "You've been lied to." He paused, the weight of it pressing against his lungs. Jungkook was taken, not on a break, not on vacation. Taken, silenced, just like countless others. We were never free. We were packaged, rewritten, medicated, and manipulated to smile on cue. Our pain was profit. Our silence was survival. He looked at Jungkook, then back at the mic. "But no more." Jungkook leaned in. "I'm Jeon Jungkook, and I'm alive." Around the country, fans stopped breathing. "I escaped, and what we're about to share may change how you see everything. But you deserve to know, you deserve the truth." The files began to stream, not digital uploads, but read aloud. Detailed. Names, dates, locations, project retune, Seraphim protocol, recorded experiments, disappearances, altered memories, doctored footage. It was brutal, relentless, unforgiving. And it was real. The frequency reached hundreds of thousands before it was jammed. But it was enough. Within minutes, hashtags erupted worldwide. Where is Jungkook? Jimin exposed Hybe. Seraphim protocol. Army split in two, those who clung to denial and those who demanded answers. The world was on fire. Back at the station, Hajun ripped off the headset. "They're on their way." Jungkook grabbed Jimin's hand. "We started it." Jimin looked at the old monitor flashing red. "No." He smiled. "We just broke the gates." The bunker lights flickered. The hum of old servers fought against the thudding footsteps above them. Dust fell from the ceiling with every tremor. A helicopter hovered somewhere in the distance. The storm outside raged as if the skis themselves were rebelling. "They're almost here," Hajun said, fingers flying across his keyboard. "Signal been cut. Servers are fried." "Then we move," Jungkook said, already pulling on a jacket too big for his frame, pain etched into every movement. Jimin stood in the corner, eyes locked on the old television screen displaying news coverage on mute. Their faces were everywhere. The headline banners screamed chaos. "Jimin and jungkook break NDA in explosive pirate broadcast." Beneath that, HYBE declines to comment. And further down, fans worldwide demand answers. "They're not going to let us walk away from this," Jimin said, voice low. "We weren't supposed to survive the truth," Jungkook replied. They exited through the underground tunnels again, Hajun leading them through passageways lit only by emergency lights and their collective desperation. The walls were damp, ancient, covered in graffiti and whispers, names, messages, desperate prayers from those who came before and never made it out. At the exit ladder, Hajun stopped. He turned to them, eyes solemn. "You're about to walk into a war, you know that, right?" Jungkook nodded. "They started at the moment they decided we weren't human." Hajun placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then burn them down for all of us." As they emerged into the back alley behind the temple, the world felt different, charged, volatile. Every phone buzzed with hashtags. Every screen lit up with grainy footage of their broadcast, being reposted faster than the system could delete it. For every account that got banned, 3 more sprang up like heads of a hydra. They were viral. But virality didn't mean safety. A car screeched around the corner. Jimin flinched, ready to run. until the door flung open and a familiar face stepped out. Taehyung. Or at least, someone who looked like Taehyung. "Get in," he said. Jungkook froze. "Is it really you?" Taehyung looked at him, and for the first time in years, the eyes weren't dead. They weren't blank or processed. They were scared, awake. "I don't know how long I've got before they take me back, but right now I'm me, so get in." Jimin hesitated. "You were in the footage, on a gurney, tubes." "Don't ask," Taehyung said, voice cracking. "Just trust me." They got in. As the car sped through the neon-lit streets of Daegu, the tension inside was thick. "I've been in the facility," Taehyung said. "The real one, underground, outside Seoul. They call it the chamber. It's where they do the rewrites, the retunings. They erase parts of us, memories, instincts, reflexes, replace them with whatever version sells." Jimin stared. "That's where they took you after Paris." "They kept me medicated, disconnected. I was still me, but watching from behind glass. I remembered everything, couldn't speak it, couldn't move, then something glitched. I woke up 2 days ago, lucid during a transfer, fought my way out." "Why help us now?" Jungkook asked. Taehyung laughed bitterly. "Because I've seen what they do to the ones who don't wake up, and because you're the only ones fighting back." Jimin leaned forward. "How do we get into the chamber?" "You don't, not unless they bring you in themselves. It's sealed. Off-grid, you either get captured, or you break someone out." Jungkook met his eyes. "We know someone in there." Taehyung didn't answer. He pulled into an abandoned airstrip. No lights, no guards, just wind. Then from the shadows, a figure emerged. "Yoongi." Jimin's mouth dropped. "No, he disappeared 2 months ago." "Taken," Taehyung said. "He escaped 3 days ago, stayed off the radar. They think he's dead." Yoongi stepped into the light, his face gaunt, one arm in a sling. "You look like shit," he told Jungkook. "Nice to see you too," Jungkook muttered. Yoongi turned to Jimin. "You really broadcasted it all." "We had no choice." "Then you just bought every one of us a death sentence," Yoongi said. "Good." Jimin blinked. "What?" "We've been waiting for the cracks. The moment, now it's here. The fans are awake, the mask is slipping." Taehyung walked up beside them. "We hit the chamber. We free the others. We show the world what they've done." "That's suicide," Jimin said. "It's revolution," Jungkook replied. Yoongi dropped a duffel bag at their feet. Inside, burner phones, forged IDs, blueprints. "I've had years to prepare. Thought I'd go alone. Guess I was wrong." Jimin knelt beside the bag, pulling out the plans. The chamber was a labyrinth, vaulted corridors, biometric locks, guard rotations, escape tunnels. A fortress built to contain gods and keep them obedient. He looked at them all. Jungkook, Taehyung, Yoongi. Each broken, each burning. "We'll need a distraction," he said. "Something so big it pulls eyes off us long enough to get in." Jungkook smirked. "What's bigger than a BTS reunion?" Jimin met his gaze. "Oh." And just like that, the plan began. The fake reunion announcement would go out tomorrow. A secret location. One night only. The first time the 7 would be together again, ARMY would flood the streets. HYBE would scramble to contain the chaos. And underneath it all, they'd slip into the belly of the beast. Not as idols. As insurgents. As brothers. They had nothing left to lose. Only each other. Dawn came pale and unforgiving, washing Seoul in a color that felt more like exposure than light. By sunrise, the announcement was everywhere. A single poster, 7 silhouettes in formation, a date, a time, no venue. BTS, one night, one truth. ARMY erupted like a storm long suppressed. Streets filled with chanting before anyone even knew where they were supposed to go. Live streams popped up in thousands. Billboards were hacked. Projection screens across the city flickered with the same 7 shadows, looping again and again like a promise or a threat. Inside a blacked-out van on the outskirts of the city, Jimin watched the chaos unfold on a burner phone. They took the bait, Yoongi said from the front seat, eyes sharp, voice low. His arm was still in a sling, but his mind was ablade. Every outlet is scrambling. HYBE is scrambling. That's exactly what we needed. Jungkook sat beside Jimin, leg bouncing, fingers tapping against his knee in a rhythm that only made sense to him. He hadn't slept. None of them had. This feels wrong, Taehyung murmured, staring out the tinted window. Using them like this, the fans. Jimin glanced at him. We're not using them. We're giving them a choice, to see or to stay blind. Taehyung let out a bitter breath. They'll still get hurt in the crossfire. Yoongi scoffed softly. They've been hurting for years. At least now it'll mean something. The van slowed as they approached an unmarked warehouse near the Han River, the decoy site, meticulously staged to look like a reunion venue. Giant LED screens, barricades, fake security, the works. HYBE's people were already swarming, convinced this was the location they needed to control. Jungkook smirked. They're hurting themselves. In the back, Ha-jun adjusted a portable transmitter. We'll piggyback on their signal. The moment they go live to secure the area, we'll mirror it. Jimin leaned forward. And the chamber. Yoongi tapped the blueprint spread across his lap. 2 kilometers underground. Old transit tunnels converted into a private facility. If we want in, we need them distracted enough to reroute power. Taehyung met Jimin's eyes in the rearview mirror. Once we're inside, there's no turning back. Jimin nodded. There hasn't been for a long time. The van turned down a service road that led to a hidden maintenance elevator buried beneath an abandoned subway station. Rusted gates creaked open, and they descended into darkness that smelled like iron, electricity, and something clinical. The elevator shuddered to a stop far below ground. When the doors slid open, the chamber revealed itself. White corridors, silent cameras, biometric scanners glowing faint blue. Everything felt too clean, too controlled, like a hospital designed to erase rather than heal. Jungkook's breath hitched. This is where they took me. Yoongi stepped out first. Stay close. Cameras looped for 90 seconds. They moved like ghosts. The first room they entered made Jimin stop cold. Rows of glass pods. Inside each, a figure lay still, eyes closed, wired to machines that hummed with quiet authority. Faces Jimin knew, trainees who vanished, idols who retired, artists who were said to have chosen a quiet life. Taehyung swallowed hard. They call this the archive. Jungkook pressed his palm against one of the pods. Inside, a young boy no older than 18 floated in a haze of sedation. This is what happens to the ones who say no, Jungkook whispered. Alarms suddenly blared. Red lights flooded the corridor. Power shift detected, a synthetic voice announced overhead. Yoongi cursed. They're onto us faster than I expected. Footsteps echoed, boots, many of them. Jimin's heart slammed. We're not here to fight every guard, we're here for the others. Taehyung turned sharply. Then move. They ran. Down a branching corridor marked Seraphim Protocol, restricted. The doors slid open automatically, and inside, suspended in a transparent chamber, were 3 figures. RM, Jin, Hoseok. Alive, unconscious, connected to a web of cables that glowed faintly like veins of artificial light. Jimin felt the air leave his lungs. No, 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 no. Jungkook was already at the control panel, hands flying over the interface. We pull them out, we trigger a full lockdown. So be it, Yoongi snapped. Do it. The chamber hissed. The glass walls retracted. One by one, their brothers collapsed into their arms. Hoseok gasped first, chest heaving, eyes fluttering open in confusion. Jimin. Jimin held him tight. I've got you, I've got you. RM coughed, disoriented, gripping Jungkook's sleeve. You actually came. Jungkook gave a shaky laugh. You thought I'd leave you. Jin was silent, staring at the ceiling like someone resurfacing from a deep ocean. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. They took everything and still wanted more. The doors behind them exploded inward. HYBE operatives poured in, weapons raised. At their front stood a man in a tailored suit Jimin recognized instantly, the executive who had smiled at them for years. "You've made a terrible mistake," he said calmly. "This ends now." Jimin stepped forward, placing himself between his brothers and the guns. "No," he replied, voice steady. "It ends for you." Ha-jun's voice crackled through their earpieces. "Signals live. The decoy site just went global. They're broadcasting everything." The executive's composure cracked. On the chamber walls, massive screens flickered to life. Footage of the chamber, the pods, the machines, the faces of those erased, the truth unfiltered. The operatives hesitated. Some lowered their weapons. The executive's jaw tightened. "Shut it down." Yoongi smiled coldly. "You can't. We're not on your system anymore." Jimin turned back to his brothers, battered, broken, breathing. "Stand up," he said softly. "All of you." They did. Not as idols. Not as products. As men who had survived. Outside, the world watched in horror and awe as the Empire bled on live broadcast. Inside the chamber, the lights burned harsh and unforgiving, but for the first time, they were not cages. They were witnesses. And the seven stood together again, not reunited for a stage, but for a reckoning that could not be undone. The power grid trembled. For a moment, all of Seoul blinked, lights dimming, screens freezing, sirens stuttering, as the chamber's internal servers overloaded, pushed to the brink by the truth spilling into the world beyond its sterile walls. Outside, armies swarmed the streets. What had begun as anticipation turned into fury. Fans screamed at barricades, chanted names with shaking voices. They carried posters like protest signs. "We believe them. Free BTS. No more silence." The world had finally seen. Inside the chamber, smoke curled from the ceiling vents as sparks rained over the ruined consoles. The glass pods cracked. The air reeked of ozone and medicine. But the seven stood, together, shoulders aligned, bruised, breathless but unbroken. Jimin turned to them slowly, scanning each face. Jungkook defiant and flame-eyed. Yoongi bleeding and gritting his teeth. Taehyung solemn but burning with clarity. Jin, Hoseok, groggy but standing tall, holding each other like anchor points in a world set adrift. "This is it," Jimin whispered. "No more comebacks, no more curtain calls." Stepped forward. "We walk out together or not at all." The executive, now disarmed, handcuffed by his own men, sat slumped against the far wall. He didn't speak. He didn't threaten. His silence screamed defeat louder than any gunfire. Jungkook crouched beside him, eyes unreadable. "You kept telling us we were chosen, that we were special." The executive looked up, blood at the corner of his mouth. "You were, that's why you were caged." Jungkook stood and walked away. The doors to the chamber stood open now. No alarms, no guards. The entire system had crumbled under its own arrogance. As they stepped into the corridor, side by side, the lights flickered in waves, like it was bowing to them. For the first time in years, there was no handler in their ears. No schedule, no camera, just the echo of their own footsteps and the breathless anticipation of freedom. A transport waited at the surface, the driver long gone. They piled in wordlessly. Jimin sat up front, watching the city skyline approach like a dream returning to him. "Where do we go?" Yoongi didn't hesitate. "Home, wherever that is now." The vehicle sped past digital billboards that still pulsed with their faces, but this time, not polished press shots. It was live footage from the rebellion, from the chamber. From the fans shouting in unison, flooding networks with messages of love, grief, and fury. It was no longer a fandom. It was a movement. Hours later, they sat in a small, dim-lit studio. No handlers, no lights, no script. Jimin hit record. To the fans who stayed, who fought, who never believed the lies, this truth is yours now. We are not returning to the stage, not because we don't love you, but because we love ourselves enough to finally stop. Our songs were always cries in disguise, and you heard them. You saved us. Now we choose life. And we hope you choose yours. Don't follow us. Find yourselves. They signed the message not with their names, but with their hearts. No hashtags, no promotion, just honesty. And then they vanished. Some say they scattered across the world. That Jungkook opened a shelter for artists who had nowhere else to go. That Yoongi ran an anonymous blog that kept leaking truths no one else dared publish. That Jimin danced alone on empty rooftops, not for crowds, but for the sky. That the others lived quiet lives in the corners of the world, tending gardens, writing poetry, loving deeply, silently. They were no longer BTS. They were no longer a product. They were survivors. And in their silence, the world learned to listen. Not to screams or slogans, but to the sound of freedom, the sound of truth. The final encore was peace. The end.